What happened to Bol Bol? Just playing with Kevin Durant, now he's unemployed? Well, would you believe he still lives in Phoenix? No NBA, just partying nonstop every night. How do I know this? Some guy on Reddit whose coworker lives 2 doors down. Okay, so shaky info, but we do know he's not on an NBA team. What happened? Well, you might think he just sucks, but that's not true. For example, from February 7th through the end of the month last year, Bol averaged 13 points, 5 boards on 54% from the field, 38% from 3 at 7'2". That includes multiple 20-plus point games. What happened? Well, actually, there is more to this story than people think. And Bol is just one of 5 valuable players without an NBA team to start the year. Now, you could just skip ahead to watch the Bol part, but I promise these 5 are worth your time. But have we hit back-to-back on Prize Picks recently? Yes, we have. But this is not just about the cash, people. I play Prize Picks to keep things interesting, especially waiting for the NBA to come back, which it almost is. But the best part about Prize Picks, their app is so easy to use. To create a lineup, all you have to do is pick more or less on a few player stats. So let's try to go 3 for 3. This week I am going with All NFL Sunday. First up, I'm going Isaiah Pacheco, more on his rushing and receiving yards. Then Drake May, more on his passing touchdowns. And if you only like one of my picks, I totally get it, despite now going 4 for 4. But this week's max discount is Steph Curry. That is right, the first NBA max discount of the year, so you only have to use one of my picks plus Steph. Prize Picks available in 45 states now, including Texas, where I live, and California. And if you play $5, you get $50 in lineups instantly, win or lose, code AMHOOPS. That is play 5, get $50 instantly for free, win or lose, code AMHOOPS. Starting with Malik Beasley, one of the best seasons from 3 in NBA history last year, 8th best all time. But the FBI announced this summer he is under investigation for a gambling crime. That killed a 3-year, $42 million extension with Detroit. Then his agent says, oh, never mind, no charges filed. But now the NBA is investigating, and there is no way he wasn't involved. From a different Pablo Torre investigation with Tom Habistro, clearly shows the Jonte Porter gambling ring was working with Beasley. The smoking gun was this tweet from a connection to Jonte Porter, who said, first was Jonte, then was Rozier, next you'll hear about MB. And sure enough, a few months later, the news breaks on Malik Beasley. How did he know? Was it a coincidence? Okay, fine. I guess I'm not saying for sure that he broke the rules, but at least you can see why no NBA team wants to touch him yet, despite a historic season last year. Next is Victor Oladipo. Vic was an all-star, who is the latest in a sad NBA trend. You know, former star who got injured, desperately wanting a second chance. Think Isaiah Thomas or DeMarcus Cousins. See, Oladipo was both all-star and all-defense, but he tore a quad tendon in 2019, never the same after that. But now, after years of false starts, he is in China, and his Chinese team played the Spurs and Clippers this preseason. Vic went off, showing step backs, getting around the other Victor, Wembanyama for a bucket. Depot dropped 42 points across 2 games, 8 assists, 7 steals. What's the problem? Well, so far, no NBA team has reached out, but may be in luck. Malcolm Brogdon suddenly retired as a backup for the New York Knicks, so there is a chance that they or someone else calls Oladipo soon. We'll just see if he can actually stick in the NBA, unlike those other vets we mentioned earlier. But speaking of the Knicks, New York offered Ben Simmons a minimum contract, and he said no. Why? Because he wants something more in line with his all-star status. Like it's 2020 or something. But Ben took a nosedive after he passed up that dunk Game 7 for the Sixers. Because Ben was so afraid of shooting that he was scared to even shoot free throws at that point, so he was avoid getting fouled. So mental health is what everyone talked about, but it's more than that. Simmons has had 2 back surgeries since leaving Philly, and you can see it in his game. He is clearly no longer that MVP or all-star type player, and until he can actually admit that and take the minimum, his career might actually be over at just 29 years old. But next is Markelle Fultz. How crazy is it that Philly had 2 number 1 picks that crashed and burned before 30? But Fultz was actually a a productive player just 2 years ago in the league. After he tore an ACL in Orlando, starts 60 games in 2023, averages 14 points and 6 dimes on 51% shooting. How is that not an NBA player anymore? Well, he goes to Sacramento last year, and despite them needing a point guard, they decided Fultz wasn't worth bringing back, and the Kings would rather have Russell Westbrook. It turns out he was so bad in Sacramento, Markelle fell out of the rotation. The new coach, Doug Christie, opted for DeMar DeRozan to back up Zach LaVine out of his natural position. So in 21 games, Fultz averaged just 3 points, 1 board, and 1 assist. The truth is, he is a good player, just maybe not on the NBA level. Now, he could still go overseas for a long career at 27 years old, just way overrated as the #1 overall pick in 2017. But that leads us to Bol Bol. One thing took him down in Phoenix. After this happened, we may never see him on the court again. But you know how Shaq always compares Bol to Victor Wembanyama? His real point is that Bol did it first. We've never seen a player like Wemby. Actually, years before Wemby broke out, Bol Bol was doing this in the bubble. A 7'2" freak moving fluid like a guard, blocking shots, hitting big transition threes. Now, it turns out Wemby is a full 5 inches taller than Bol, but still fun as hell to watch, unique skill set. The problem was consistency, and that went back to the draft. See, Bol had a foot injury in college, which dropped him from a potential lottery pick all the way to the second round, and it's a lot easier to bench second round guys. Plus, he was behind Nikola Jokic on a win now team, ride the bench. So, when Bol landed in Orlando, it was a fresh start. He started 33 games, averaged about 10 and 6, shot 40% from 3 in the month of December. But the same thing always took him down. Coach Michael Malone said, "I think there's been a consistent message to Bol that no one ever questions your talent, your abilities, but what has been questionable at times is maybe your work ethic, your commitment, your discipline. That is a red flag." And in Orlando, coaches got frustrated that Bol would just space out during games, especially on defense. So he got one last chance in Phoenix. And remember, February when he was going off, but then March 12th against Houston, it all went down. Steven Adams, Mason Plumlee get in a fight, knocked to the ground. I mean, what's more exciting than 2 7-footers fighting? All the teammates coming to back up their guy, except Bol Bol. Look at him. He is so bored, he just starts like shooting layups, which is actually kind of hilarious. But you know who didn't think it was funny? Coach Mike Budenholzer. He was so upset. Dude benched Bol the rest of the season, and we may never see him on the court again. It must have been the last straw of Bol being super casual behind the scenes. That was his pattern after all. So what is Bol doing now? Well, it turns out his actual passion is fashion. He's needed custom clothes most of his life, so now he's hooked. Dude even had a resell page where he would flip high-end pieces like an $18,000 pair of jeans. And he did that while making millions. So apparently he just loves it. I mean, imagine if he was that focused on basketball. So what happened to Bol Bol? Well, kid made about $10.5 million off of his 1 in a billion genetics, and now he can just turn his focus to what he actually cares about. And I kind of respect that. But some honorable mentions who didn't quite make the list: Alec Burks shot 40% from 3 4 of his last 5 seasons not on a team. Keon Ellis, who led the Nets in minutes last year. Corey Joseph might still have something left in the tank. Torrey Craig for defense. But one guy who does love basketball apparently is Bronny James. But his preseason has been so bad that you have to ask, is he actually an NBA player? Well, unfortunately for Bronny, we may be seeing his final days in the league, and there is proof of that.